And welcome to another edition of The Dark Place. I'm your host, Adam. And tonight we will be diving into a case that I had never really heard about. This is the case of T.J. Lane. Before we begin tonight, please check out all the past episodes at the Other People's Show on Spotify, YouTube, and Facebook. Now, a lot of the cases that we've talked about thus far, they've been, I would have to say a lot of them have had signs that have been overlooked. There have been reasons why these teens have committed these atrocious murders. And quite often, not that I feel sympathetic to the shooter or the killer, but part of me as a human feels sympathetic to the fact that a lot of these teenagers that we've discussed have shown signs of mental health issues. They have tried to reach out in one way or the other. That can't really be said of T.J. Lane. So on the morning of February 27th, 2012, 6 students were shot at Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio. There were 3 of them died. 2 were wounded. 1 sustained permanent paralysis, and the other one had a minor injury in a superficial wound. The suspect was Thomas M. T.J. Lane III. He was a 17-year-old juvenile and a former student of Chardon who was a sophomore, and he attended Lake Academy Alternative School, and he used a bus that several of the victims used also. So really what we know about T.J. Lane is we don't really know a complete motive to this very day. We do know that T.J. Lane suffered no mental illness that we have been able to conclude by any of the psychiatrists, therapists, doctors. But he was from a very troubled household. His father was in and out of his life briefly, always into trouble, always on the wrong side of the law. And it was just kind of a situation where you would, and I've kind of run into this recently. You go a while without hearing from someone or hearing about someone, I guess. And then they bring up this name, and they say, oh, so-and-so has been incarcerated for 18 years. And then you think back, or at least I do, I think back whenever I'm in school with these kids, or was in school with the kids, and I'm like, they were always in trouble. They were always getting into some kind of trouble. And I remember thinking, I wasn't surprised that they ended up in jail. I wasn't surprised that they ended up on the wrong side of Johnny Law. But that can't be said of T.J. Lane exactly. Not exactly. Now, T.J. Lane, he did come from a troubled family. Very, like I said, very rough family. His dad in and out of his life. His mother and such on drugs throughout his life as well. He went to live with his grandparents, but they were older people. Um, he also got into some trouble with his nephews were being, he thought, or they said they were being abused by his uncle. So TJ Lane duct tape or tied his uncle to a chair, and the I guess the nephews and himself beat and really wounded the uncle. And TJ did not really receive many, like a charge for this, but that would make me think twice about what this kid's capable of. So let's give a little bit more background information. So, as we're saying, we're studying the background and the early life of T.J. Lane. He was born on September 19th, 1994. Like I said, his childhood, it was marked by a horrible family environment. Reports suggested that he faced various challenges, including neglect, abuse, exposure to drugs, and not really ever having a role model. And you know that this would probably play a huge factor in the cycle of not only the cycle of poverty, but also the cycle of violence and living the way that he lived, and that he saw this is how you live, because that's all he knew. So there were really never any signs at school about TJ Lane. He was a quiet kid. He wasn't a loner, but he did have a few select friends. But he was always kind of one that, he was polite, but he kept to himself. He never really, I would say, had a best friend. He never really had any friends over at his house, nor did he really go to any other friend's house also. But that being said, that nothing other than the earlier event with his uncle would indicate that TJ Lane was capable of what he was doing. So, I think a lot of these, apart from the psychological factors, you have to take the social and the environment that TJ Lane is in. And it doesn't really say that he was involved in, or that he liked any violent video games or violent movies, or he had a tendency to be violent at all toward anyone. That was never stated or ever said. But he didn't have a support system. And that lack of stable support, and if he did have any mental health issues, he kept them inside. He never really spoke about them to anyone, and never really opened up at school also. So that was another interesting thing. Now, on the morning of, let's skip around, or not skip around here, but on the morning of, like I said, February 27th, 6 of those students were shot at the high school. TJ Lane was the suspect. He used a .22 caliber handgun, and he was arrested not far from the school by his car. Now, originally, he stated that he didn't do this. He wasn't the one that was guilty of this. Thank you, Lisa. But he later confessed that he did kill these people. He originally also said that he was hearing voices. Someone told him to do it. That wasn't the case. He did confess, and his confession, you can find that on YouTube. It is, it's. I would play some audio from the confession, but it's a little difficult to hear, so you'll have to check that out with subtitles for yourself. So, following a competency hearing in May 2012, a judge determined that Lane was competent to stand trial. He pleaded guilty and received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole on March 19th, 2013. So, what you have here is a teenager going unchecked, living unchecked, never really having any supervision, never really having a stable support system at home, a family life. He's okay. He was a wallflower, but he did have a few select friends. His grades were average, and he was no more than just an average student or person as far as society knew. But in that morning, before the classes, many of the students, they'd gathered in the cafeteria, some to get some breakfast, others waited for a bus. They waited for the vocational school for, it was kind of like a hall, like a center hall where students would meet there, and then they would get on their buses and go to their different classes. And that's kind of when this happened. So this, according to reports, a boy stood up in the cafeteria and began shooting at approximately 7:30, causing chaos. The surveillance video showed a shooter, TJ Lane, shooting 4 male students at one table with a handgun. He wounded another. He fled the school. He shot a female student when he was chased out by the teacher, hero Joseph Ritchie, and a football coach, Frank Hall. Lane was arrested outside the school near his car where he had parked. There has never really been 100% motive for this crime. Now, there were reports and murmurs stating that possibly, one of the victims was dating TJ's ex-girlfriend. That made him mad. The guy threatened to beat TJ up. We don't really know 100% if that's what it was. But police searched the home of TJ Lane. Didn't really find anything. They found the gun when they found got him in the car. And they also went to check out Lane's maternal grandparents, Jack Nolan and his wife. Lane did not live there, but he frequently visited on the weekends, and nothing was really found. And the neighbors said that Lane was a quiet but relatively good kid. Now, there were some heavy reactions from the friends. One friend described Lane as a very normal teenage boy. She told CNN that she was in a complete shock after the incident. It said that Lane often seemed sad, but appeared to be completely normal. Another friend said that Lane was often teased at school, which made Lane put up a wall around him. And he came from a really broken down home. He was said to be a quiet person who could be nice to others if he felt comfortable around them. Other students said that he had not been bullied, and they described him as friendly and nice, but not very talkative. So, what really gets me about this case is not only the horrific murders, but also during the court hearing, the sentencing. So the day that TJ Lane shot up his school, he had a t-shirt, a sweater, actually. A sweater that said killer across the front. The word killer. As he shot these people, these other students. So during the sentencing, he had a button-down blue shirt. He walks into the courtroom, and as he's walking into the courtroom, he starts unbuttoning the button-down shirt. and he takes off that unbuttoned shirt, and it says "Killer" written across the t-shirt. As he's sitting in the courtroom, only a mere couple feet from the victims' families. So just imagine that. Your son, daughter, has been shot by this seemingly sad but normal looking kid. The kid's wearing, teenager, not really a kid. The teen is wearing a shirt that says "Killer" across it, as he did when the crime happened. So, as you can tell from the video, you can watch this on YouTube. As you can tell on the video, the attorney of TJ is distraught. He does not know this is coming. They sit there, chit-chat for just a moment, quietly. TJ listens. And then the judge asks if TJ has anything to say. TJ did have something to say. Now, this is one of the most, what he had to say made me despise this kid even more. And not only just despise this kid, but loathe this kid's existence. He looked over to the victims' families, and he said, "This is the hand that pulled the trigger that killed your sons now, masturbates to the memory. Fuck all of you," while giving the middle finger to everyone in attendance. I don't know how I would have handled that had I been in the courtroom and had to witness this little punk say these types of things. I would have probably jumped over the bench, and the bailiff, I guess, would have had to pull me back. But TJ Lane just sat there with a smirk on his face as they continued on and then led him out. Now, in 2014, on 7 p.m. on 2014, he did... Excuse me here. We always have some kind of an issue sometimes, don't we? There we go. So, in 2014, September 11th, 2014, Lane escaped from Allen Correctional Institution in Lima, Ohio, along with 2 other inmates. They used a makeshift ladder to scale a fence during recreation time. One of the inmates was quickly captured. Lane and the other inmate, identified as 45-year-old Clifford, Upperwood of Carlisle, Ohio, was serving a 12-year sentence. They remained at large. At 1:20 a.m. the following day, Lane was captured near the woods, and the other was apprehended about 3 hours later. The Chardon High School was closed the same day because they were kind of afraid if he's escaped, maybe he's come back to get revenge or vengeance to those that survived. Lane was transferred to the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility, and he is currently at the Warren Correctional Institute in Lebanon, Ohio. Now, it makes me, when doing research for some of these cases, there are they're all horrendous crimes, deaths, and it's always very tragic and sad. This is one of the ones that I've done so far. I could actually, I would want to hit if I were a violent person. Now, me as myself, no. But TJ Lane deserves everything that he's gotten. Yes, he did not have a lot of the comforts that we often take for granted growing up. But I'm sure there's comforts that you have and comforts that I have, or don't have, should I say, where we don't act like him. That's not the outcome of how we behave. So that doesn't have to be the outcome of how TJ Lane or any of these teens behave. There's got to be a point where, we also we look at the mental health, situations of these teens in America, in the world, and we look at the environment they're growing up in. We look at what they're exposed to, but we also need to look at their work ethic. Are they being treated if they need to be treated? If they can't be treated and are not being treated, what should that step be? Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, how did TJ Lane get the weapon? Well, remember earlier in the episode when I was telling you about the uncle that he beat up? Well, he stole the .22 caliber from that uncle, and that's how he obtained it. Now, I think part of the solution just right off is we're going to have to install metal detectors in every single school in America, or gun detectors, something like that. It's a must. It's a must. But also, you have to think, just like Susan said, it's this person's choice to do what they did. Would TJ Lane have committed the murder if he didn't have the gun? Would he have gotten a knife like Michael Hernandez? Would he have gotten a hatchet or an axe? Yes, guns do kill people. But this ink pen that I hold in my hand could kill someone too. It's all within the person that holds the object. I don't know a lot about TJ Lane, but what I do know about TJ Lane is that I'm glad I never met TJ Lane. And right now, TJ Lane is sitting behind bars until he dies. Another wasted life. For what? What reason? 3 deaths, 2 others injured. Many, many lives ruined. The selfishness of TJ Lane. If you're interested in going further with the case, you can please do that on YouTube. TJ Lane. There's a lot of information out there. If you're interested in diving into a few cases that we've got into before, go to the Other People's Show on YouTube. Like and subscribe, please. And go to Spotify, Facebook, The Other People's Show. I'm Adam for The Dark Place. Have a good night.